thanks everyone for being here tonight. This is going to be a lot of fun. So I'm just thrilled to be with you. Before I introduce these amazing women, Susan told me I could maybe take a second and tell you a little story or two. And as Justice Durham was talking, I thought of some interesting experiences I had maybe when I was your age, for some of you young women out there, and maybe some formative experiences, because usually we know that when you have a believer, someone who believes in you, you will believe in yourself. And so I hope you seek out those people that believe in you. But I remember I had a junior high counselor when I was in 8th grade, and I was going through one of those kind of interesting spells. I decided to kind of cut my hair short, and in the 80s we had clothes that were 3 times too big for us. Remember that? And so anyway, I remember, it wasn't probably the best phase of my life, but I remember one day I was in her office and she looked at me and she said, "Heather, you're a leader." And I was like, "Are you talking to me? Who are you talking to?" And I had no idea. And she said, "We're going to have PBS here tomorrow at our school, and I want you to help give the tour." And I was totally shocked. I thought, "Are you kidding me?" And so it was a moment in my life where I went, wow, I have an opportunity to be a leader. And since then, I've had many opportunities to take leadership positions, and just like tonight we've heard, leadership isn't always in that title, but it's being a leader and becoming a leader, and all of your leaders. And I hope you recognize that, right now, that you have the opportunity in your spheres to become leaders. So anyway, with that, I'm going to introduce our amazing panel to you today. So over to my left, right here, we have Kylie Tanner, and she is the Assistant Clubs Coordinator here at UVU. And she graduated with a bachelor's degree in communication just this last year. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting in her bio is she was the president of the Ping Pong Club. So I really want to hear about that, actually, but Ping Pong Club, that's awesome. So she also is a UVU Foundation ambassador. So she has a lot to share with us tonight. And then next to her, we have Michelle Loveday. And she's an educator, so she's taught school. She's also been a vice principal and a principal, and right now she works for Granite School District, and she's working in the Department of Educational Equity, which I think is fantastic. And she'll probably talk and tell us a little bit about that as well. When she's not in the schools, she is a member of her church's praise team. And I thought that was a really cool thing. So she's on her praise team, which helps youth and helping them where needed. And then also, she's a member of Delta Sigma Theta, and she serves in the community. She's the president of the local chapter, and she's a mother of 5 children, and she has chickens. I thought that was really interesting too. So I'm learning all sorts of really interesting things about all these women on the panel. So I have to say 5 kids, but the chickens were like, wow, that's really cool. So anyway, and then next to her we have Shelly Nielsen. And she's excited to be here. She's also, she spoke many times up and down the Wasatch Front and into Idaho. She's been a student, she was student body president at Logan High School, and she was also elected governor at Girls State. And it seems like she's an Aggie in her email. It was Aggie. Yes, true Aggie. So I saw that, I thought that was great. And she has a small business that she runs, and she serves on the school community council. She also is involved in many things, and a mother of 5 children also. So wonderful to have you, Shelly.
But no chickens.
No chickens, though. But good ice cream if you've ever been up to, up north. So, and then next to her we have Maggie Scribner, and she's a freshman at BYU, studying public health. And she's the oldest of 6 kids, so she's had a lot of opportunities to work in leadership. Is that right? So Maggie was on the student council for 3 years in high school. She's played several sports, and she served on her community council. She also volunteered at Timpanogos Hospital. And then her mom told me she was also president of the Ginger Pride Club, which I thought was awesome too. I was like, wow. So anyway, Maggie, we are happy to have you here too. So we're going to just dive right in, and I hope all of you think of some questions. I'm hoping we'll have some extra time tonight, and we'd love to hear from you and have you ask some questions of everyone up here on the panel. So like I mentioned earlier, there's usually a formative experience sometime in everyone's life when someone will reach out to you and tell you that you're a leader, or someone has believed in you. And most women especially can remember that experience or that person that told them they were a leader. And so I thought we'd just go around real quick, and I'll start with Kylie, and just ask you to share maybe one of your formative experiences that helped you in wanting to lead.
All right, thank you. I'm super excited to be here tonight. It's so awesome to see so many familiar faces and new faces, and it's going to be a good evening. To answer your question, though, Heather, I think the first time I remember, I never really considered myself to be a leader when I was younger, because, you know, we're kind of taught that leaders have these important titles and they have to be in Congress and things like that. But when I was probably 12, I was in a leadership position in my church, and I was involved that way, and one of my leaders had just talked to me about how I was a good example to the girls, and I thought, wow, I'm an example to someone? Like, I didn't think people were watching me. And she said, these younger girls are watching you, and I thought, wow, that must mean something. And I kind of, from that moment on, I realized that I had the potential to become a leader, and I wanted to kind of progress that forward. So I'll talk more about that later, but I'd love to hear from you guys.
So this was a harder question for me because I had to remember back then, and I was reminded of how awesome the 80s were at that point. And so one of those formative years was my 6th grade year. You could, I was on safety patrol, kind of a crossing guard, 4th and 5th grade, but 6th grade was the year that you could put your name in for captain. And so for some reason, I didn't realize that there's also a lieutenant. I just had my mindset on captain. And I thought, oh, I could do this. And it wasn't anything that someone particularly said to me. It was just the description of what a captain of safety patrol is and what they do. And, you know, being the youngest female, I was the only girl in my family. I had 2 older brothers. I thought, oh my gosh, I'd get to tell all the boys what to do, and they would have to listen to me. And so I went for, you know, captain of safety patrol. Sadly, I didn't get it. I became lieutenant. I didn't even know what I was supposed to do with that position. So it was a good starting point for me to see, A, you don't get everything that you go for the first time, and B, it is okay to be the second in command, so to speak. In that position, you're just as important. So I think that was what shaped my leadership.
That's fun to see just in yourself being attracted to captain, or being attracted to being president of something, or, you know, being an officer. There's something inside all of us that wants to be a leader. Mine is a little, you know, I'll do mine kind of more the end of high school. Like Heather mentioned, I was the student body president at Logan High, along with my other 2 sisters. So I'm the middle of 3 girls, and it was just something. You know, someone said, "Oh, why did you think you could run for student body president?" I thought, why couldn't I? You know, I didn't ever think I couldn't be president because I was a girl. That was something that I just wanted to do, and I thought I could do it. But as I was leaving high school, I remember kind of towards the end of the year, and I was going to go up to Utah State, and someone said, "Oh, are you going to be student body president at Utah State?" And I said, "Oh, no, no way. That's huge. How could I ever do that?" And all of a sudden, I got there and realized that's not big. That's just, you know, you get involved in this committee, and then you help on a campaign. And, you know, 2 years later, I was student body president at Utah State. So it's a small thing, you know, that it's something that seems big. Oh, I could never run for that, or I could never start a club, or I could never do something. But start small. Join the club, and then before you know it, you're running it, or before you know it, you've started a new one. So, I don't know if that. Oh, yes. We'll trade, yeah.
Okay, mine was a similar story, except for it was my 8th grade year, less exciting than college. And I didn't run for student body president. I ran for secretary of labor, which was a thing in my junior high student council. That was the first time. I don't know why I even decided to run for student council as an 8th grader, but I think I don't know, I was interested in maybe making a few more friends, maybe being a little more popular, which is not a good reason to do that. Don't do that. But I was not the smartest 8th grader around. But I remember just thinking I was going to go for a teacher-appointed position because my teachers loved me. They always had. That was my thing. I wasn't good with people my own age, but teachers loved me. But I decided, after looking at all the positions, to go for a student-elected position. I ended up running against this really popular kid, and somehow I ended up winning, and that was kind of, I don't know, a big thing to me that that even though I didn't see myself as a popular kid, it had worked out in my favor. I was always kind to people, and it worked out in my favor, I guess.
Well, that's great. One of the common threads I think that we can hear is just they all showed up. And I remember once being at a political event, and I asked somebody, I said, how did you end up getting here or whatever? And they said, you know what, I just showed up. And I've taken that advice for the last few years because I'm going to have a little confession here too. I actually never took a poli-sci class in college. And so even though I was one of the governor's campaign managers, so I actually showed up. I was involved in a community issue about 15 years ago. And next thing I knew, we had people show up at my doorstep, and we started connecting with other people. And next thing I knew, people said, hey, we need to get this effort going. And this TV camera was in my face saying, hey, are you guys, opposing this development? And next thing I knew, we were kind of organizing our neighborhood. And then after that, we decided to run a mayoral campaign, and our guy won. And so we were totally shocked because we had never done that before. And then after that, I just kind of showed up to things. And then next thing I knew, I had people calling me saying, hey, will you help run my campaign? And I was like, wait, what? And I'm holding my little baby, and I'm like, this wasn't exactly what I planned, but I absolutely loved it. A fantastic experience. But what I tell people all the time is so many of these things happen just because you're willing to put yourself out there. And so just remember that. And that's the common thread is, just putting yourself out there, running for captain and being lieutenant captain, right, of safety patrol, and I'm sure she rocked that. And so just being willing to just even volunteer in some capacity, because so many times we look at things and I think we see it as too big. We see this thing as big, like you were saying, the president of a student organization. That's so big, but you just show up. So I hope all of you listen to that and do it, okay? So that is the key part. Well, thank you for what you've shared. So why should the young women in the audience today use their voices, and how can they lead right now? So that's one of the things I'd like to talk about. And Michelle, why don't we start with you, and then we'll just kind of go this way.
Okay, so how many of you are in middle school? Raise your hand. Look at that. That is amazing. And it's also a scary time in your life, right? There's so many things going on inside, outside of your body alone. And so you're trying to figure yourself out, let alone here we're talking to you about how important it is to lead. I want to touch on a subject that maybe you've heard in the news that you definitely can play a role. As middle school students, even high school students, speaking up for the wrong is something that can prevent anything from happening in the future. So if you're thinking about, oh, I could never be a leader, if you see someone that's out at the cafeteria and they're always getting their tray slammed down by someone, and you just watch it and you're not doing anything about it, that's taking a back seat to what's happening. But you can be a leader and stick up and say something, whether not to that person, maybe because they're a little intimidating, but you can alert the principal and say, hey, you know what, every day when I'm at lunch, I just need you to follow me into the lunchroom so I can point something out to you, right? And I look at what's happened in the news with the gymnastics issue that happened. And you're here tonight, and I think it's incredibly important that as young women that you're not afraid to use your voice when something's going wrong. And if those young ladies were encouraged and empowered and not silenced by their voice, how many more young ladies could have been prevented of being hurt by, someone that they think that they could trust? So I think you have to look at it, well, it may not change while you're in that seat, but I'm gonna speak up because I don't want that to happen to my little sister. I don't want that to happen to my cousin. And it could be in any shape or form. It doesn't have to be large like the gymnastics issue. It could be something small as, someone's being paid to get their homework completed by somebody else. And that happens. And if you know it happens, speak up. And there's a risk that comes with it. But I think at the end of the line, once you take that risk and speak up, you're gonna see, later on in life, you're gonna be glad you did. You don't want any regrets.
Wouldn't she be the coolest principal? Oh my gosh, I wish she'd been my principal. How fun. I'd be always want to go to the principal's office.
I just have to say, she
hang
does
out.
not look old enough to have 5 kids. I want to look this
Right.
young.
Yes. Yes.
Look up a saying about our skin tone in black and not cracking.
Oh, well. And fun and amazing. Okay, so the question, why should we use our voice, right?
Why should the young women?
So I love what Michelle said. When you use your voice, you give other people permission to, and other people confidence. But I think in using your voice and leading, it builds character in yourself. Leading is scary, and you learn things about yourself sometimes you don't want to. Like, shoot, I'm kind of bossy. Oh, I only like my way. Ask my husband. Sometimes I think my way's the best, and I don't love other suggestions. But I think that's things that you learn. I remember when I was in student body officer in high school, having a vision of a way that something should be decorated. We were decorating the lobby for Spirit Week, and I had in my head a way that it should be, and I learned through collaborating that there was a better way than I had. My friend Georgina came and said, well, what if we hung it this way, or what if we did that way? And so I think that you learn things about yourself by being a leader, and it builds character in yourself. I think another thing is when you use your voice as a leader, it builds confidence in you, and you'll try to do something else. And then you'll be surrounded by people that are people that are serving and leading, are selfless and confident, and you're surrounding yourself by great people and probably some cute boys. So there's that, right?
I think that's good enough reason. Might as well stop. So when I think of using your voice, one way that I thought about this a little differently is that you don't have to be giving a speech to 1 million people. You don't have to be speaking out about something necessarily. You should, if it's bad. But I think that another way to use your voice is befriending people. It's reaching out and supporting people who maybe don't have the support systems that you have. And it's building others up. And I think especially throughout junior high and high school, that is so important. That's how I made some of my very best friends. And I don't know, it helped me learn so much as I turned outside of myself and as I was able to use my voice for good in that way.
I love that. Kylie.
I just have to add one thing to that. So I didn't even know Maggie was going to be speaking tonight, but she is friends with my little sister. And one thing that my sister Savannah has always said is there is not one person at Timpanogos High School who does not like Maggie Scribner. And I think that's so true. Like, I don't even know her super well, but it's pretty powerful when you have someone like my sister who doesn't really know Maggie super well. Like, they're not best friends, but Maggie's the type of person that will just walk down the hall and say hi to everyone. And I kind of have some regrets about, in high school, not like I was rude or anything, but just opportunities where I could have reached out and helped, and my voice was silent. And so, yeah, I love that. Thank you.
I love that because it's interesting, and something I've told my kids a few times is it's interesting because the kids that are usually the most popular, or even I've gone to a high school reunion, and the ones you remember are the ones that really were just friends with everybody, that didn't really care about, they weren't into their own ego, but they just talked to everyone. And I still remember a few of those kids' names, and one was named Rob, and I remember he just kind of went through the high school, and he knew everybody's name. I mean, he just made it a point to know their names, and he just memorized it. I think he probably took like the yearbook or something and just memorized it. But it meant a lot to everyone, and everybody considered him a friend. And so that's something that you can do right now, and being a leader, and you don't know what that means to someone else, because you don't know if they have very many friends or what their home situation is. But just even saying hi or recognizing someone, that's huge, and that's really being a leader. So great thoughts on that. Okay, so let's go to the next question. So why do you think it's important that young women prepare right now to be leaders in the future? I mean, what's the future going to be like, and what's the future going to be like for these young women right now, but what can they do? So let's start with you, Shelley, and then just kind of go around this way.
I think throughout your life, no matter how old you are, everyone's going to need your perspective, a woman's perspective in an organization. And so you start now, and you'll be influencing, on all levels, all the way to whether you have the opportunity to be a principal, a teacher, run clubs. I stay home with my kids, but I have a online business and do a lot with my kids' schools and things. And my voice matters. It's skills that I developed when I was your age are helping and blessing my community and my family and my kids.
I am still young. I'm still a child, and I feel kind of unqualified to answer this question, but I know that I really admire women like you who, when I see you in leadership positions and I see you being successful and doing great things, and then that reminds me that I can do those things as well.
Yeah, getting involved just really creates a solid foundation for your life. And I don't want the word leader to scare anyone here, because you guys are all leaders and everyone has something they're passionate about. And I want to share something that I thought was really awesome. I spoke at this training that was held at UVU called Elect Her. And it was just encouraging women to not necessarily run for office, but get involved in whatever it may be. And one thing that they said is, what is an issue you care about? What is an issue that you care about? 2, why do you care about it? What is your personal connection to the issue? 3, what solution do you suggest for that issue? And 4, how might you implement those solutions? And if you think about something you're passionate about, or, we can all find a problem in the world, I'm sure. There are plenty of them, but if we're passionate about something, take that passion and use it for good, and try to find something that you can get involved in. And I think that's going back to the question of why it's so important, is just because we are literally the future leaders of America, not to sound all political and stuff, but seriously, it's so important, whether it's on a community level or you take it even bigger. And I think it starts with the little things, just doing the small, simple things. And like Heather said, 90% of success is showing up. There were so many times in high school where I just didn't want to go. I was on student council, and I kind of got burned out towards the end of the year, and I was just, do I have to do this? But when you commit to something and you stick through, push through to the end, it really teaches you a lot about, the power of your mind and the ability you have to do hard things. So get involved.
I definitely agree. I think the one thing about getting involved in leadership young is it helps you develop a thick skin and helps you to figure out who you are. So even if you are in love with animals and you want to work at the Humane Society, get involved there, take a leadership position there, find what interests you and work at that. I think as you're preparing yourself for later in life, you have to give yourself an opportunity to try different things out and not be afraid to do that. I don't know how many of you walk around thinking, I don't want to get involved in anything. I just have no drive to do anything. You're interested in something. You're obviously interested in something, whether it's hair or shoes or dogs or something else that you're interested in for, it could be chickens. You can come take care of mine.
I was just going to say, more chickens.
It's random. That happened when I was unsupervised by my husband. But really, that's another story. But really, it's important for you to start getting how you operate down. Because once you figure out what kind of leader you are, you can be that leader. And it's emphasized over and over again that it's not just a title. I know a lot of times, and I had to tell many people that, yeah, my title is principal, but that was just so that somebody could take the fall when something didn't go right, really. Because at the end of the day, I looked towards the teachers that were in my school that could get things done. And most importantly, I looked towards my students. Many of you might have heard of Franklin Covey and the Leader in Me program. But thanks to a parent saying, hey, we should put that into our school, and my community council sending me to a workshop about it, I was led to say, okay, this is something that my students need. And it was to a point where by the end of me being at my school after 5.5 years, the assemblies weren't run by me. My students did it. My student council did it. If kindergarten had an assembly, I went to my student council and said, hey, kindergarten needs an assembly. I want to see what you're going to do. We talked about it. I helped them think it through. But leadership is not about always being out in the forefront. There's many times where you're a leader and you're in the back shadow, and you have to be okay with not having your name stamped on everything. And I think if you take a moment and just start small, whether it be in your neighborhood or in your school, you get used to what it feels like to be a leader. Because it's lonely and it's humbling, but you definitely can do it, and you can learn what happens in that life.
I love that. And I think one of the things that's so important, and it just kind of clicked in my brain, is that leaders and titles are two different things. And I really hope that we all realize that, because titles, people can have titles, and I've met a lot of people with some big titles, but it's interesting how many are real leaders. And I'm going to just tell you just a little something about the governor that's really interesting, but he's one of the most humble people I've probably ever worked with. And he's not afraid to meet with anybody who's on the opposing side of any issue with him. And I have literally seen people, I never knew what spitting mad was until I went to some town halls. And I saw people just purple in the face and spitting, and he was just calm and listening to them. And it was an attribute that I thought, you know what, I need that. I need to not get too emotional. I need to not get upset, and a lot of times that's what hurts our argument, is when we get angry. Because even though we get passionate about something, we can be passionate, but we also need to be respectful of other opinions, even the ones that are different than our opinions. And so I think that's just something we need to remember. And like I said, it's interesting to work with people with different titles, because another little thing about the governor is we always have this joke, because he is the last one to leave any event, okay? Like, it doesn't matter what time it is, and he will be pushing a broom and putting away the chairs. Like, I actually have some photos that I've kind of taken like this, and but he'll be stacking the chairs, and the most successful projects I've also worked on with people is when, and this is, I heard a quote, and I'm just going to paraphrase it, but it's when no one cares who gets the credit, then it will be a success. And I think that that's really important to remember. When no one cares who gets the credit, then it will be a success. Because if everyone's in it as a team and wanting something better, that's how we know that it will be a success. I'm going to do one last question, and then I want to turn some time over to you. So be thinking of your questions. But I thought about one that, I thought about the fear of failure, because there are studies out there that women, a lot of times, we don't put ourselves out there, and I can be the first one to say I am totally guilty of this. Usually I can think of every reason not to apply for something, or I can say I'm not totally qualified because I am missing this little element. And so we have a tendency to do that. We're men, and they'll look at something and they'll say, I am 50% qualified, I am good to go, Like, they'll look at their resume, hey, this is the job, the job criteria, and they'll say, okay, hey, I meet 50%. Women, we go, ooh, I'm only at 90%, I got that 10% that, maybe I'm not totally qualified. And so I think we scare ourselves away from applying ourselves a lot of times. But that fear of failure, and I'm not even sure exactly how I want to word this question, but how has that affected your life? And what would you, what advice would you give your younger self in order to get over that fear of failure? So let's start with you, Maggie, your younger self, even though she's a senior this year.
Oh, man. I think one of the best lessons that I learned about dealing with the fear of failure came one time when I failed. I ran for vice president of my no, not my junior high school, my high school. I ran for student body vice president. It's a pretty big high school. It was a big deal. Running for student council at my high school was huge, and I gave a speech, and we had to do a dumb little skit and a dance in front of the whole school, embarrassing, definitely. And when I lost, I was so devastated. I thought that something was wrong with me. I thought that it tanked my self-worth because this was people voted for the people that they liked, so maybe people didn't like me, and I was so distraught. But it took me a while to realize that that's what helped me grow, and now I'm less scared to go for things because I understand that life goes on. And I did end up on the student council just as a generic cabinet member, and that's when also I learned that you don't need a title. I did so much more that year than I ever probably could have. I didn't have to take the fall for some of the problems that our student council had because I wasn't in the presidency. But yeah, that was definitely the biggest thing that I learned, is that failure is a necessary part of growth. And you can't let it stop you from going for things. You have to go for things, and then you have to move forward regardless of the result.
I love that. Okay, Kylie, I'm going to turn that to you.
I think we could just end with Maggie right there. That was awesome. I totally agree. I mean, I was talking to Susan Madsen right just before this. She's in a different session now, but she was talking about some research she's done and just how most women feel, they don't try for things because they're scared that they won't, get them. And I thought, why is that happening with women? Why aren't we as confident as men? And I just think that it's so important just to be confident, but not necessarily, in a rude way, but just confidence can go a long way. And just the humility of losing is huge as well. And I was listening to a podcast a few days ago that talked about, it said the unconscious mindset, there's this unconscious mindset that we call scarcity, and that there's not enough. And so sometimes we wake up and we say, oh, I didn't get enough sleep. I know my husband's right here, and I say that to him every day. I didn't get enough sleep this morning, or last night, I mean. And then, we say, there's not enough time in the day. There's not enough this. And then we start to think we're not enough. And I think when we have that mindset, we do let fear get into the way because we're timid to try things. And so I think one way we can kind of combat that is to just focus on what we do have. Hey, you know what? I got 5 hours of sleep last night. That was great. At least I didn't get 4. Or, I'm so glad that I focus on the things you accomplish in the day and not saying, oh, I wish I had got this and this and this done. We need to give ourselves more credit because we're awesome. And so I think that's one thing that will go a long way.
This is why I always just ask what the younger generation thinks, because they said everything that needs to be said. If I could go back and tell my younger self one thing about leadership is, one, don't be afraid of the word no, which I think goes along with failure. There's a book that I love to read to my little daughters that's called Amazing Grace. And in the book, Amazing Grace loves to tell stories. She reads the stories and then she acts them out. So if she reads about pirates one day, she's a pirate the next day, and she's wearing the items and she's on the ship and she's using her dog as the parrot. And she just has this wild imaginations that's amazing, which goes with her name, Grace. And she, heard in her elementary class that they were gonna have Peter Pan as the play. And her friends were like, you can't be Peter Pan, you're a boy. And so she goes home kind of feeling defeated, and her mom's like, what do they know? Who says? That's not okay. And she was able to get encouragement again. And then they went back, and another friend said, oh my goodness, you can't be Peter Pan, you're black. And she went back and was defeated, and her grandmother took her to see Swan Lake and see a beautiful prima ballerina that was defeating the odds as the first black female doing that. And so at the end of the story, Amazing Grace didn't say no and didn't take what her friends were saying to her. She auditioned for the part, and guess what? She got it. She became Peter Pan. So who's to say that you can't, right? So in failure in that sense is, there are times where you might not get the part. You might not get the position that you want on student council, but don't be afraid of the word no. And you have to, in order to get to where you're going, Failure is part of that. I didn't get to where I am because I got every job I applied for. I applied in Alpine School District when I first moved here. They said no. I applied in Jordan School District to become a principal. They said no. I'm where I need to be because I'm supposed to be there. Failure sometimes is the doors closing so that other amazing double doors can swing your way. And so you have to take that failure as an opportunity of, oh, dang, something is about to be lit. I'm gonna just tear it up. It's gonna be amazing. I just have to keep trying and don't say no to what the possibility of that is.
These are awesome. These are awesome comments. So several things when you talk about, failure and not getting something and running for something or applying. The most impressive thing that you can do if you run for something and don't get it, let's not even call that a failure because you ran. Yeah. First of all, there's, 1,000 kids in your school or 2,000 kids in your school and 20 of you ran. I mean, you're 20 of 2,000 that even had the courage to do it. So that's a win. That's a success right there. If they choose someone and not you, it doesn't mean they didn't want you. It maybe just means they wanted that other person. And I remember when I was helping a friend that I was supporting someone that was running for student body president at Utah State. And their opponent challenged me a little bit. And I said, oh, it's not that I don't want you. I just want this, this is the person who I've been on committees with or I've supported. And so it wasn't that I don't want you. So think about that too. If you don't get something, it's not that they didn't want you. Maybe they wanted that other person for different reasons, and that's fine. But the most impressive thing you can do if you don't get what you ran for is still be involved. Still be involved. You get these kids that want to run for student council in junior high or high school, and they say, I love this school, I want to make a change, I want to do this and that, and then they don't get elected, and they don't do anything. Well, did they love the school then? Did they really want to help? Or did they want the title and the sweater and the, or that? I had a number of friends that maybe didn't get the position they ran for, and they still showed up, and they participated, and they were awesome. And they had just as many experiences, and they got to be involved. And so that's, then the next time when you go to do something, people will remember, oh, they still participated, and they really did mean what they said because they participated regardless. And so even if you don't get the certain position you want, don't be too proud to still get involved. And when we talk about ways you can get involved and how you can do it, everyone says, oh, I don't know how to get involved. How did you even do that? 4 simple words. You find the leader, someone in charge, and say, how can I help? And I promise you'll be leading. You say, how can I help? So ask your coach, ask your counselor, ask the student body president, whoever, hey, how can I help? And they'll find a position for you.
Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. This was a great discussion, and it reminded me, just know this also. We're still learning things. Like, even though some of us up here are a little adultish, right? We're still learning things. And there's so many things that I need to learn better, and you're inspiring me, and your comments, and be that influence for good for others. So thank you.